sleep, but the next morning he felt pressure in his chest, and an X-ray revealed his AirPod stuck in his esophagus. The doctor inserted a lasso tool down his throat. As he tucked his daughter in, she looked scared and asked him to check the closet. The father smiled and walked over. As he pulled the closet door open, his face went numb. His daughter, she was crying, trembling. He completely froze and horror before snapping his head back to the bed. It was empty. He was panicked for a moment, but he shook it off. Must have just been his imagination. He calmed his daughter, tucked her in for real this time, and left the room. The dark room settled for a moment, but then the closet door slowly creaked open. If a whale swallowed an AirTag, you might think you could track it across the ocean. But AirTags don't have GPS. Instead, when it's near a smartphone, it sends out a tiny signal that the phone picks up. It then sends the AirTag's location to a map, updating where it is in real time. That's why they work well in crowded places where lots of people have phones. So until fish get their fins on some iPhones, you wouldn't be able to track the... If you get kicked by a horse, it would shatter your ribs instantly, and the pieces would pierce your organs, causing massive internal bleeding. A kangaroo, on the other hand, would use its tail for balance before kicking you with both feet. This would damage your organs, and its claws would leave deep gashes in your chest. But a gorilla could punch you with over 1,000 pounds of force, breaking your bones and knocking you unconscious. And the second punch would almost certainly kill you. Have you ever wondered how nuclear bombs actually work? Well, the mechanics for the earliest bombs were not as complex as you might think. You see, the bomb known as Little Boy functioned much like a gun. An explosive detonator forced a small cylinder of uranium to crash into a bigger one. And the impact? It drove the uranium to a supercritical level, sparking a self-sustaining nuclear reactor. If you whip your arm out of the socket and twist it, you could lick your elbow. But for most people, that's not an option. Your arms are too long, your tongue is too short, and your joints just don't bend that far. But about 1% of people can actually do it. And this is because some of them have shorter arms, others have longer tongues, and some are just extremely flexible. He stuck his hand through the bars to pet the animal, and instantly, the tiger's powerful teeth sank into his flesh. He struggled to pull away, but the animal refused to let go, shaking its head violently and tearing into his arm. Blood poured onto the ground as onlookers screamed for help. His arm was nearly severed, but he refused to let the doctors amputate it, and despite their efforts to save him, he later died from the attack. As he rappelled down, part of his gear suddenly snapped. You see, he ordered a new harness, but it hadn't arrived in time for the trip. And once he was there, his partner noticed his gear was damaged. But the world-famous climber began the route anyway. As he made his way up the cliff, the harness scraped against the rock. This wore it down even more, and when he put his weight on the gear, the loop suddenly gave way. He plummeted 500 feet to the ground, tragically his death. As he rappelled down, part of his... If you're tied to train tracks, and there's a train approaching, you might think that there's no way to survive. Now, as soon as you're spotted, the conductor will apply the emergency brakes, but it'll still take several hundred feet for the train to stop. If you can't escape, your last resort would be to try and position yourself in the tiny space between the train and the tracks, and hope you don't get it. He smashed a bottle of wine over her head, knocking her out. But this wasn't just some random attack. He was an author and had just published a book. And after reading it, the girl left a bad review. Instead of just ignoring it, he tracked her down through social media and traveled 500 miles just to find her. She was stacking shelves at a supermarket when he showed up and attacked her. He was arrested and sentenced to over 2 years in prison over one single book review. His arm got stuck in the metal slot as he tried to steal a soda. Someone called for help, and firefighters tried to free him. But even though they hacked at the machine with axes, the boy's arm remained stuck. Finally, they protected him with a blanket before using a powerful saw to cut through the thick metal. And after an hour, he was set free, leaving his arm numb and the machine in ruins. His Left in the cold, she crawled into a dog kennel for warmth and ended up staying there for 5 years. During that time, she learned to bark, growl, and walk on all fours like her canine companions. By the time she was rescued, she had lost the ability to speak and would eat like a dog, lick herself, and even pant. Authorities struggled to rescue her as the dogs fiercely protected her, but they eventually lured the pack away with food. She was reintroduced to society, but retained the animal behavior. If a cannonball was shot at you while you were wearing a bulletproof vest, it would tear right through your body instantly. Even with 20 vests stacked together, it would hit you with almost the same impact, plowing right through. At 100 vests, some energy would be absorbed, but the force of impact would still break your bones and crush your organs. Now, if you were to stack 5,000 vests, creating a wall dozens of feet thick, you would finally stop the cannonball. But the force would still travel through the vests, and since they're attached to you, you'd still be thrown to the ground. Corsets used to be squeezed so tight back in the 19th century that some women actually had their internal organs shifted around. And this would sometimes cause them severe digestive issues. Some women also experienced breathing problems and would faint frequently. Wearing a tight corset from a young age often caused deformities in the rib cage, making them narrow and compressed as they aged. If someone
Robbie, but what? Yo, die noch mal reden!
If someone is choking, you can stand behind them, wrap your arms around their waist, and shove your fist upward just above their belly button. This sudden impact forcefully pushes air from the lungs up into the throat. The pressure builds as air accumulates behind the food until it dislodges the blockage, which clears the airway. And while this maneuver can be life-saving, it can also break ribs and cause bruising. If a surgeon makes an incision on the top of your head and removes the bald skin. Then they pull the hair-covered scalp on the side of your head upwards, stretching it over the top. And once both sides meet in the middle, they're pulled together to close the gap. Stitches are used to hold the skin in place while it heals. And over time, the remaining hair spreads out, making you look less bald.
You ever wonder what happens when you mix hot lava and chicken? I did, and you're about to find out. You hear that? That's the sound of sizzling. Smell that smell. La 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 lava, chicken. Steve's lava chicken, yeah, it's tasty as hell. Ooh, mama, sit now you're ringing the bell. Crispy and juicy, now you're having a snack. Ooh, super spicy, it's a lava attack.
If you somehow hollowed out your skin. Some people think you could actually inflate it like a balloon if you stitched up all the openings. But your skin is made up of tiny little holes, causing air to slowly leak out. And even if you somehow manage to create an airtight seal, the delicate skin, like your eyelids, isn't as stretchy as rubber. As the skin inflated, the pressure would just... If you collected all of the spit you produce during your lifetime, most people would think it would only be a few gallons. But you actually produce over a liter in just one day to help break down food in your mouth. And for the average person's lifetime, you would produce about 8,000 gallons, which would be enough to completely fill a pool about this size. The table would spin the mother around as she was giving birth, and it could generate up to 8 Gs of force, the same amount a fighter pilot would feel at high speeds. As it spun, the baby would be pushed downward, and a small net at the end was supposed to catch it once it was born. Doctors would be there to help the process go smoothly, but even though the idea was patented, it was never used in hospitals for obvious reasons. He watched the masked man grabbing and dragging his own lifeless body across the floor. You see, he had acquired this special security camera that let him see into the future. Curious, he set it up, eager to test its abilities. But as soon as he turned on the live view, his stomach dropped. He slammed the laptop shut. His hands were shaking. That was him, dead. He took a deep breath and forced himself to watch it again. Over and over. Every time, the masked man grabbed and pulled his dead body across the floor. He scoured the internet, searching for the mask. Nothing matched. He double-checked his locks and installed more. For days, he barely slept. Every sound sent a jolt through his chest. Then, one night, a sharp crack echoed through the house. He froze. It was footsteps. He grabbed the knife and crept downstairs. She tripped and fell, stabbing herself with a pencil. It pierced through her cheek before burying itself in her brain. But at that time, doctors didn't know how to remove it safely, so they just left it. As she grew up, she suffered terrible headaches. Her nose bled all the time, and she even lost her sense of smell. But finally, after 55 years, doctors figured out how to remove most of it, and her pain stopped, even though a tiny piece was still left inside her. This frog swallows its own fertilized eggs, sending them straight into its stomach. But instead of digesting them, its body shuts off stomach acid, turning the belly into a protective nursery. Inside, the embryos develop safely, feeding off their yolk sacs as they grow into tiny frogs. After several weeks, the mother begins to vomit, and one by one, the fully formed froglets crawl out of her mouth. This
东北的天儿是嘎嘎冷的天儿啊。
Forms over a burn. Some people think they should pop it, but this exposes the wound to bacteria, meaning it could easily get infected. And once it does heal, it's more likely to leave a scar. You see, when the blister forms, it fills up with fluid, and this locks out germs, protecting the raw skin underneath and speeding up healing, which is why you should just let it go down on its own. When a blister forms over a burn, some people think they should pop it, but this exposes the wound to bacteria, meaning it could easily get infected. And once it does heal, it's more likely to leave a scar. You see, when the blister forms, it fills up with germs, protecting the raw skin underneath and speeding up healing, which is why you should just let it go down on its own. When a blister forms over a burn, some people think they should pop it, but this exposes the wound to bacteria, meaning it could easily get infected. And once it does heal, it's more likely to leave a scar. You see, when the blister forms, it fills up with fluid, and This locks out germs, protecting the raw skin underneath and speeding up healing.